See.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. It's 6:34. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board. I was going to say Charter Township Board. Tonight is Tuesday, October 3rd, 2017, and we're going to do the pledge. If you'd be kind enough to join us. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Randy, roll call, please.
Trustee LaRue.
Here.
Trustee Wiegand.
Here.
Trustee Everson.
Here.
Trustee Marks.
Present.
Treasurer Johnson.
Here.
Clerk Rattari is here, and Supervisor Durant.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard, our Township Attorney Roger Zappa. Committee member present is Mike Springer from Planning, Recreation, and Roads.
Thanks. Looks like we're ready to go. Any public comment, Mike or Lisa? You want to add anything? Okay. Board member comment in relation to public comment. We can take that one off. See, Ernie, how fast this agenda goes. Consent agenda. I will read that. I would like to pull out the supervisor's report and add that to our bottom 9 as a pulled out item. There's 2 or 3 updates I need to give you on that and a couple things that have happened. I submit that report on Thursday by noon, so a lot can happen between then and Tuesday night. So I just want to update you on a few things for that. Otherwise, I will read what we have. Consent agenda tonight includes approval of the regular meeting minutes of September 19th, bills payable in the amount of $69,000, oh, that was low, $843.37, received committee reports and other reports, including tonight, Marquette County Township Association agenda for September 27th, road committee agenda of October 3rd, and draft minutes of July 5th, Marquette County Solid Waste Management Authority approved minutes of September 21st, utility billing calendar for October of 2017, and then we're pulling my report. Financials tonight include the August financial statement. Correspondence not requiring board action is a pledge letter from Mr. and Mrs. Springer on the underpass, and charter communication lineup change. They're deleting a couple of channels.
Move for approval.
I'll move to approval, second John's approval as amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That's done. And then approval of the rest of the agenda.
I'll move to accept the agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Number 6 is board education staff reports. We don't have any tonight. That falls to our second meeting of the month. 7 is community linkage. We are going to talk briefly about the road commission letters that we've been going back and forth. I'll give the public and the board a little bit of a reminder, a little bit of history. Randy Gerard and I met with Ray Roberts and Jim Iwaniki of the Road Commission Friday, August 4th. And I had a series of questions for them about what's going on in the township or not going on. I asked what the long-term plan for work in the township was in the next 5 years, regardless of the road project we're just completing. I asked them what the budget was before and after the road project and what we had allotted for us for the next year. I asked them about culverts, driveways, and sand, what the project list was for them, for the township. We talked about ordinances, enforcement, and fines if people didn't do what they were supposed to do. I asked about the drain commissioner and what our relationship with them was and how we work with them. And I pointed out that we were aware that when we have them do work for us, there is an upcharge in addition to whatever their cost is. I also asked about what we could do in Lansing with them, for ourselves, work with grants, or if there's anybody we could contact. So it was, I believe, about a 90-minute or 2-hour meeting, somewhere in there. And we didn't get a lot of a lot of good answers. There's no budget for us, regardless of whether or not we have the road project. Sweeping is kind of the main thing, sand removal and mowing in the summer. And then they just do the plowing as necessary, obviously in the winter. So I brought this to the board after we met, and we talked about it. I gave you their answers. We made that part of the packet. And we got a letter back from the then chair, Ray Roberts. I believe that Joe Valenti is the current chair now. I'm not sure if their terms changed, but now he's the vice chair. But regardless, at the time, August 22nd, Ray Roberts wrote back to us saying, commenting on a lot of the points that we had talked about in the meeting, and we had asked him, Randy and I, if the two of our boards could get together and meet and just talk about stuff, whatever was going on or not going on, or what did the future hold, or where are we after the road project. So we got this nice 2-page letter back from Ray, and you've been given that, and it was in the packet, saying basically they're not interested in meeting with us. So Randy and I kind of figured, well, maybe they don't understand. Maybe they don't do this frequently. We've met with the city numerous times. We meet with the planning commission. We met with business association, and that's what we do so that we can discuss things. So I wrote back to them individually, mailed each one to each individual road commissioner, and said, maybe you misunderstood. We just want to have a conversation. And I got a call back from Ray, it must have been last week, saying, no, we're not interested in meeting with you. If you want to talk, you need to talk to staff. And he apologized. He said, it's not that we don't want to work with you, it's just that we don't do this. We don't meet with our townships as a commission or a board. And I said, well, because he said, you need to talk to staff about all the issues you have. We're willing to send 1 or maybe even 2 commissioners to your board if you want to talk with them, and maybe a couple of yours or your whole board, but they're not interested in doing a work session, which is what we requested. And so I kind of reiterated and said, are you misunderstanding? These aren't operational or administrative issues we want to talk about. It's more philosophical, and how you see funding in the future happening, or what's happening with the county. Or I said, these are board-to-board issues. And so basically he apologized and said, nope, it's not going to happen. So what do you want to do about that? Just not worry about it? Or there is a township relations meeting, I believe it's Thursday night.
Yep.
And I'm going to go to that. I don't know how many other supervisors, or it's kind of designed for supervisors meeting with the road commission on it's quarterly actually meetings. So
They're
I'll
told
go
that
and,
any board member could go to that, they said.
yeah, that's true. They've kind of opened it up more, but that was the intent originally. So sometimes there's 3 or 4 different representatives there from other townships. Sometimes there's 12 or 15, and they just visit with the road commissioner that attends. It's usually just one, and then Jim Iwaniki. So they answer questions, give road updates, and talk about whatever. Randy?
Yeah, I did bump into one of the road commissioners, and they basically said what you said, we're not meeting with you. And I said, okay, well, we've extended our hand to do this, and if you're not interested, I guess there's nothing we can do about that other than put our wishes in writing to the road commission and
To the county board.
to the county board, and go to that road commission relations committee, I guess. And that's all we can do. We've exhausted our,
Mm-hmm.
we've extended our hand, and they haven't responded back, so.
Lynn,
Yes, sir.
do they answer to the county board?
They kind of don't answer to anybody, but they're sort of under the the county road commission, they've gone to the road commission, they've gone to the county commission and asked for funding over the years to put, a $500,000 or $1 million or whatever on the ballot to try to work on the roads, and the county said it'll never happen.
They
So-
don't answer to anybody.
Pretty much not. And do I understand that correctly, Randy or Roger?
They are an independent political body to themselves, basically. The county board has limited jurisdiction over them from the standpoint of appointing members to the board of county road commissioners, but that board does not directly report to the county board. They're a creature of statute. They're created by a statute.
And they're
So
all
it's-
just appointed then by
The county.
by the county.
Correct.
Well, that is one open door. If a complaint is made to the county board about the appointees that they have appointed, we can ask for a revision. But, I mean, that's one door open.
Mhm.
It's not much. But I think this is traditionally across the state, you run into this problem. It
Yeah.
happens in all counties, some a whole lot larger than this. And it's been an ongoing thing over the years, but it would take legislative action to revise the edict under which they operate. I think that there's the one, I would emphasize that we could ask the board to appoint people who would be more cooperative. But I also think that we can ask the legislative members that write the laws that allow them to operate this way to consider revisions, and here's why. So I think that a letter to our legislators indicating the absence of a cooperative spirit would be in order.
It's something we could do. That'll change a little bit with the next election,
Hopefully.
depending on who gets in. Pete?
I think what you're right, send a letter to Jerry Cork and just tell him that we reached out to them to discuss what's going on. And I think that was a very good answer. There was a meeting at the Marquette Township Association the other night, and I thought he was pretty defensive. I started asking different questions, and he was a little bit defensive. And also, the other option is that you can take back your roads. There's a couple downstate that took back all their roads. They got rid of the road commission. It's not cheap. It might not be a good idea, but it has happened.
Especially because of the equipment issue of trying to
Exactly.
maintain them.
General
It might be, too,
general-
why Jennifer Granholm suggested a few years ago, and apparently it had happened before that, but I wasn't aware that the commission just be abolished. And then it would fall back to the county to do whatever was necessary. Dave?
I think this is, we just went through this with the Waste Management Authority about operating autonomously, just doing whatever they want to do, and I think the county's elevated it to a fine art of doing whatever they want to do, and I think this is a pretty typical example of what you get out of the county. And it's a sad statement, and everybody, when you talk about taking your roads back from the county, and everybody throws their hands up in the air about all the costs involved, and the thing is, we don't know what costs are involved. We don't know what kind of money we'd get from the states. I would think that would be a worthwhile project to explore, if for no other reason, to put some pressure on the county to get involved in what's going on in their county and in their charges. I mean, to let us sit here and do all of this repairs to the roads, and to have them not even be able to come out and trim the grass on the side or trim trees back where they're overhanging the road. I mean, that's just shameful.
Then they charge us for it anyhow.
And then
Upcharge.
and then
Yeah.
and then they come out, and when we do get something done, and they're not even the ones doing it, they're just putting the package together, and they charge us 17% for putting the package together. I mean, that.
They
is-
fix their roads.
It's really ridiculous. And I really think there should be some way to bring some pressure to bear on that, because that's inexcusable. If this government, if this board operated that way, the residents would be up in arms.
Yes.
But the county's been doing it for so long, and we're talking better than 20 years, that people have just thrown their hands up in the air and just said, oh, that's the way the county operates. But, you know, it doesn't have to be. I think it's time that some government municipalities got together and said, no, enough is enough. And there are steps you can take back your roads, and yeah, it may be too expensive, and it may not be cost effective, but in all honesty, we don't know if it is or not. And I think this might be a good time to find out. I think the biggest problem you're gonna have if you start proceeding down that trail is find out how much money we would get. Because I think it's all smoke and mirrors over there, and I don't think they know. But I think we ought to bring some pressure to bear, because frankly, I don't think we're getting anything out of them. And to think that we let this whole thing ride on the way it is, just so we can get our streets plowed in the wintertime, is not a good reason to let that happen. I think we need to get a little more forceful in what we're doing here.
When Jim says that every time they have to hire somebody, they budget $100,000, I looked at him like, where would that money go? How are you figuring that?
When-
Apparently, they're not paying them all $100,000.
When you've got a government body that they don't plan advance, they have no forecast as to what they're gonna do 5 years. The reason they don't wanna sit down and talk to us about it is because they don't know. Because they spend all year putting fires out. And
That's what they said.
and
They admit
have,
that.
and they have no planning. And I think a good example of what goes on at the county level is when they get their windfall that they just got, and they go out and buy equipment, and they don't put one dime towards road repair.
Not for 2 more years, then
And-
they're gonna put
and-
$100,000.
And then, they don't have any maintenance program for their equipment. They just run them until they fall apart, and then they just say, oh, I guess we can't do any more work because our equipment's broke. That's just shameful for a county entity to be operating that way.
Why don't you bring up what was brought up at the road commission tonight about fixing up our roads that was fixed up, and then they bring a machine and just wreck the road? No.
Yeah, we've got a couple of roads, and I was gonna get into that in the road report, but we've got a street, Orchard Street, where they brought a piece of equipment in. I think it was next to Trustee Everson's place, where they were gonna clean out some sediment. And this road was done 2 years ago. It's a brand-new road. They back an excavator off on it without pads or anything else on it. They turn it around in the middle of the road. They've got our brand-new road all dug up, and they have made no effort to come back and fix it at all. And that is where the residents of this township spent good, hard-earned money to go out and fix the roads, because the county wouldn't put up any money or budget any money to take care of it. And then they come in and they do that. They pull equipment off and they don't fix their problem. They had another gentleman over that we've been trying to get fixed all summer. That is not gonna happen, is on Moran Street, where one of their contractors pulled a piece of equipment off and dug the road up. And they come in and put cold patch in it. And if you remember, when we budgeted the road maintenance for this year, and originally the county put this whole package together, the one they were charging us 17% for, their whole solution to this was to put crack seal in cracks that were 1 inch and 2 inches wide. And when they're asked about it, they know it's not the right thing to do, but that's the way they do it. And if you have big holes, they will put cold patch in it, which anybody that's ever been out there driving around on the roads in this township knows that as soon as you put cold patch in, the first thing that happens when you get a frost cycle is it pops the cold patch out and it pushes it off the road. So the township took it upon itself to go out and get a contractor to come in and fix these roads that needed something more than crack seal. And I think if you go take a look at them, it's impressive what they did. You can look at it at the end of Woodridge and Fair, where that intersection is, and how they did that repair there, where we had some 2 and 3 inch wide cracks in the asphalt, and they did it along Brookton Road, where they had some wide cracks in the asphalt. And the county doesn't even consider doing that. It's not even in their list of fixes, which is just, it's sad, and it speaks very poorly of the county road commission, and it speaks very poorly of the county commission because they have a little more control there than anybody else, but they choose not to exercise any of it.
One of the first things I said when we met with the two of them that August, they were wondering what we were going to talk about. I told them I had the list of questions, and I said, one of the things I want to address is maybe seeing how we can help you get a better image in the county and work with you and see what you need, or, you know, how we can forge this relationship a little bit better. And I got the deer in the headlights look, like, what?
Well, and you've got
So he
the
said,
state
you know, we've been
government.
doing this for 20 years and it's worked, so we're going to continue to do what we're doing.
You have the governor and the legislature that one of their big emphasis for years has been infrastructure. And you can throw as much money at infrastructure as you want, but if you're throwing it at a county that the first thing they're gonna do is go out and buy new equipment, you're not gonna get a whole lot of infrastructure fixed. And I suspect that this is not the only road commission that has that same approach to life.
What is it that we get for the money? I mean, we talk about snow plowing,
Yeah, that's what I said.
3 days after a storm.
Mowing and snow plowing, sand, that's all they do. That's
Well,
their charge.
they don't, I've never seen a sweeper in the township. I may miss it, I don't know, but
Well,
I
if
see them
you-
on the
if you
highways and
recall,
stuff.
The sand sweeping, we're on a
This-
rotating schedule, and was it last year that we got pushed way back because their sweeper broke? And they didn't have any means to fix it
Once every 5 years?
because of their maintenance schedule. And this is, I mean, we're paying tax dollars for this, and this is what we're getting. And if we did the road project that the township took on and did it with the same emphasis on quality that the county exercises on a daily basis, the residents would be up here looking for a recall, and I couldn't blame them.
We don't have any
Lynn?
recourse with this, yes.
If Pete wants to make that a motion about sending a letter to Jerry Corkin, I'll support that.
I don't think we need a motion, we just have to do it, that's all. But if you will, I'll make that motion, we send a letter to the chairperson Corkin about our feelings about the cooperation between the Marquette County Road Commission and the township.
And maybe the board, Jerry and the board.
Randy?
Just from the standpoint of protocol, we do have two representatives on the county board, and the letter should be through them. They should take that letter on our behalf to the board and both support it. Commissioner Petro and Commissioner Adamini.
Should we ask them to come and talk to us, the representatives, either one or two, or the board, or how?
I, for one,
how
don't
would
want to
you
just sweep it under the rug and let it keep happening because it's not right.
sweep it
Can't
under the
sweep it
road?
because we
Yeah,
don't.
under the
have-
road, yeah.
I think
But
the
again,
letter should go to them.
Eagle's Nest is another good example that was brought up at our meetings.
There you go.
Over a year now, fix something up
It
there.
was a year ago last spring, one of their culverts failed, and they come out and they did replace the culvert on our brand-new road. They cut a piece of asphalt out of there so they could put the culvert in. They put gravel in there. It's been over a year and a half, and they have not repaired the asphalt yet. It's still gravel sitting where they replaced the culvert at. And I would challenge you to think that you're gonna make them do that, because they will just tell you they don't have the money, and that'll be the end of it. So if we wanna get that done, we're gonna have to budget it into our maintenance dollars.
Randy?
You know, and, dovetailing on what Supervisor Durant had said earlier, that, you know, that was, what you just raised, trustee, is the reason we wanted to get together with the Road Commission Board, and the reason that we met with them in the first place was because we're just finishing our roads project, and we wanted to get an idea of what their long-range plan is, since we're now starting on our maintenance program. So we didn't want to be duplicating what they were already scheduling to do, and we wanted to try and coordinate that so we weren't wasting our tax money, millage money, on projects that they already had planned or had already been scheduled, and how we could coordinate those kinds of things going forward for the next 15 years, so we would both know what each other was going to be doing, and we could could play off of each other and coordinate and possibly generate a little more income and a little more benefit to the roads. I mean, that was the purpose for us getting together, and and we wanted to talk about a number of the issues that we knew that they already had, and how might we be able to help them overcome those issues so we can then get going on it. We were approaching it from the standpoint that we understand that they've got 19 townships to deal with, and some of them are pretty remote, and and it takes a lot to get that work done. But we're one of probably, well, if not the most traveled. We're certainly among the top 3 with Chocolate Township, Negaunee Township, and us with regard to the number of motoring miles that are put on our roads and the amount of stress and the amount of damage and the amount of issues that go on. And we wanted to approach it from that standpoint that, we're investing a lot of money in the roads, so now how can they help us preserve those roads, because we can't deal with drainage issues like they can. We don't have the equipment for the roadsides, and we were talking before the meeting about Brookton Road. The new road that we did on Brookton Road is already starting to erode away on the sides because they're not maintaining the sides of the road. So how do we address those issues? That was our thought. On their side, I think after being involved with the county for many years, they are a pretty independent body. They don't have any oversight, and realistically, I think they have evolved their system into the point where essentially the staff runs the road commission. The governing board, the Board of County Road Commissioners, is purely a policy body, and from that standpoint, they're nervous about meeting with us because this board is much more active, and it's not just a policy body. You are a policy body, but you're also an oversight body, and I don't know that that's the case there. So there may be a little bit of a dichotomy in that structure. What they want to do is they want to have maybe one of their board members and their engineer manager meet with one of our board members and me as a township manager. We've already done that. The point is, where do we go from here? It was what we were trying to get to, and formulating our plan. I mean, we're in the process now. We've finished our road project almost. We're doing the punch list items now for the 3rd year of it. But all of our roads have been done. And now we're at the point of planning on how we're going to maintain those roads and what the sequence of that planning is. And we're simply trying to coordinate with the road commission, and we're having a hard time doing that.
Pete?
The other night at the Marquette County Township Association, Jim was there, Iwaniki was there, and I asked a couple questions. I asked him about the Road Soft program, if they follow that, and they started saying a couple things. In other words, they don't. I asked about Commerce Drive out here. I said, that's your road. You were taking care of that. It was your contract to fix it. Now it needs repair. It needs repair from the day one because they had cracks in it and they never fixed it. Now they have to come back and fix it. Do you have any plans in updating that? Because we're taking care of the rest of the roads. He said, no, we don't have no plans to fix anything. So it's just, maybe I put him on the spot a little bit, but, he got it coming. Gee whiz, it's just what we're putting out there, trying to fix our roads, and if we don't keep up with our roads, who else is going to do it? They're not going to. They have no plans of fixing this road in which it needs work. Next year, they should be fixing this road out in front. It needs some repair.
Dave?
In reference to Manager Gerard's comment, is I don't think there's any chance that we're going to duplicate efforts with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so either.
Well, excuse me, John, for 1 second. Brookton Road is a good example. It's a safety hazard, and I'd be willing to go up there and put barricades and stop the traffic until they come and fix it. Because, you drop off, like if you're going down Brookton, you're going to drop that far off of the blacktop.
Well,
So-
Brookton's kind of a bad example because when we
Yeah,
talked
Dave lives on
about-
that road.
Yeah, it's his fault. When we talked about initially trying to repair that road, the road commission didn't want to take it on because of the constraints of the road itself. They weren't able to make it the width they wanted and with the structure they wanted because of the width and the trees and the people who live back there. So I kind of have to defend the commission in that respect because we talked at length about them saying, okay, we're going to do this, but it's not going to be the right way. So we're kind of stuck with,
Just takes gravel and,
trying to defend them a little bit.
well, don't, because it's a McNick Road, and the different policies that go along with that. But still, when you put blacktop road and you got your shoulders dropping off and it's a safety hazard, No-brainer.
Agree. Dan?
I was just wondering what the other townships feel with Chockley, if they're having issues, if they've discussed the same issues that we're having, Negaunee Township. If we can correspond with them enough too and see if they're having some of the same issues and go in this whole thing together and put some pressure on them.
Shockley has the same problem.
Yeah, Nagaunie's talking about it.
Connie has the same, Sands has the same town.
John, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think sending the letter is a good idea. Sending it to the board chair and the rest of the board is equally in order. But I think there's one thing that should be included in our letter. Traditionally, this township and other townships that work with the county board, they ask us to be supportive of the funds that they seek from the state each year. There's a cry come out every year that they are not funded as much as they should be. So why don't we include in our letter, and I leave this to the manager or whoever's going to write the letter, that our letter should include the indication that we've had problems with our county board trying to build a good relationship. And in the absence of that, we may want to seriously indicate to the state that perhaps it would be without our support when they make this next request. I think if you can get to the dollars that they receive and indicate that we're going to withhold being supportive of their seeking more funds, if they can't change their attitude about cooperation.
Ernie?
Well, part of that is, imagine, it's Act 51 gets in there real quick in that, so we really don't have a lot of control because that's all on state statutes and that too, so, and that's how it's divided out. And it does by the number of mileage in the township and the number of population in the township and that. Those are the two key things, plus whatever the state wants to throw in and that, so. So if we want to go our own ways, you have to almost have the Act 51 changed, and then I don't want the legislature to get involved with that because all of a sudden, the whole thing's gonna change, and that, you may get nothing at the time and that too, so. But, going back to the meeting that, Trustee LaRue was talking about, I sat there and I was, the response from the county engineer to me was not very well presented at all. He got very upset because the questions are even asked and that. So it's almost like, this is what we're gonna do, and really, you take it or leave it. And that's the way it amounts to. When he brought up about Commerce Drive here, real quick, he said, what about the, whatever road he was talking about on the west end there? What about that one? How does that fit in there? We weren't even talking about that. So he went on the defensive immediately in that. So it's just the way they operate in that. I've seen too much of back in the 90s, it was the same way, and that hasn't changed a bit. And that different people on the board, but they just don't want to get involved with it. And that.
I was not disrespectful of them.
No. No, you weren't. No, Pete asked some very good questions, and the answers coming back was really not professional, as far as I'm concerned. They should have been in that. He got very defensive real quick because the questions were asked.
I'm surprised he went to the meeting because that's one of the things I recommended. There's the township relations meeting quarterly with the road commission and the townships, and then the Marquette County Township Association meets monthly. And actually, it's gonna be during our budget session next week, I think, so we're gonna end up probably missing that, but I suggested to Jim that maybe he dissolve that township relations meeting and prevent everybody from having to worry about another meeting and just go to the County Township Association meeting because there are more township, at least supervisors in many cases, and a lot of other board members there. There's usually 20 or 30 that attend, 20 or 30 people, you know, from the 19 townships, or the, yeah. And I said, to me, that seems like kind of a no-brainer. You've got a bigger audience, you've got more feedback, you've got people that you can inform of what you're doing instead of just doing one or two. So I was really surprised to see him on that, in the minutes that he attended. But I'll bet you that's the last one he goes to, because he probably feels like he got beat up and it's not a good use of his time. And it's easier to go and talk to 2 or 3, maybe supervisors quarterly, and tell them what you want rather than what they're looking for, and get it done. Pete?
It's a good place for him to be.
Yeah,
For
that's
one
where he
reason,
belongs.
is that when I'm hollering about the cracks in Commerce Drive, you got another guy over here hollering about, could we get some gravel? It makes me look like a turkey. You know, I mean, I'm hollering about fixing that crack, and he don't even have blacktop roads. And so that's the same thing the other night. Well, what about the road on the west? And they wanted gravel, and I'm hollering about the cracks in the road, you know? So it's a good out for him in one way, you know? But
Yeah.
it's
Randy?
That was a cheap shot.
We really didn't want to go here in this direction when we were meeting with them, but there has to be some consideration given. We recognize fully that the road commission's got a lot of territory to cover with 19 townships, but I think some consideration needs to be given. There was a question about why are we different? Why would we be different? Kind of a veiled question came out that why would we be different than any other township? And I guess the answer to that is, we are the only township that has an urban residential area, of the 19. We carry far and away the heaviest volume of any of the townships in terms of traffic on the roadways and wear and tear on the roadways. And we've put a lot of money into the county roads within our jurisdiction over the last 3 years. And we'll be putting more money into it over the next 12 years. So I think those considerations were the points we were trying to make about, we're not trying to single anything out, but we do have some needs of our DPW, our roads DPW, and we have some desires to be in a working relationship with them so we can accomplish what we need to accomplish with safe travel on the roadways. So I think those things were thrown out there, and it does make us a little different. Pete, you're right. There are townships out there that don't even have paved roads. Well, they don't have any traffic either. So I mean, that's the reason why they don't. We have a small resident population. We've only got 3,900 of 4,000 residents, but they are clustered in a urban residential center, basically, of our township. And, we carry a tremendous, with the hospital, the university, and the shopping area, we carry a tremendous amount of traffic, 32,000 cars a day through US 41, depending on the count, 32 to 36,000, depending on who's counting and when it is. Through the US 41 corridor, but they then branch off of that corridor onto the other roads through the township, Wright Street, Ontario, Werner. So we carry a lot of traffic. Brookton Road, I think at least one person sitting around this table would say that there's been an increase in traffic on Brookton Road. I know Marquette has heavy traffic on Brookton Road now that they used to avoid. So I mean, we have a lot of road miles being driven in the township, and I think those things should just get some consideration from the County Board of Road Commissioners.
To Corkin or our representatives, what am I asking for? What result would I
Explain what
expect to
happened.
get?
Explain what happened, and just tell me that you're not satisfied with the answers that you're getting. Can the board help us out to put us all together? Do we all have to go up to one of their meetings, or do we have to go to county board meeting?
Okay,
What influence have they got over him,
Randy?
Would it be unreasonable to take the position of initially addressing the county board, copied to the County Board of Road Commissioners, taking the position that over the last 3 years we have reconstructed all of the roads in Marquette Township. We have a millage that's going to be in effect for the next 12 years to maintain those roads. We need help from the county board in establishing a relationship between their County Board of Road Commissioners and our board so we can plan for that next 12 years.
Probably say.
Something along those lines. Well, and if they do say that, I mean, if that is the response, then, as Trustee Marks suggested, there is another step that can be taken to address the funding question.
Okay. I have my marching orders, that's good. That's what I was looking for, was some
That
direction.
was a short 5 minutes.
So you have a motion and a second on the floor for that letter.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, budget work session dates under policy discussion. It's for Randy.
Okay, I did put this back on the agenda because on our October 11th budget work session is going to be very tough for our township manager and our fire chief to be at. So they're asking consideration if we can maybe move that earlier in the week to Monday or Tuesday.
Randy?
Yeah, I did raise this question with Clerk Rotari, and I think we discussed it a little bit at the last board meeting when you said that. The board wants me to go to the Supreme Court hearing on October 12th, which is in Lansing, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which means I would have to travel down to Lansing the evening before, which would be a conflict with that budget session. Now, you do have the option. You have the option of going forward with the budget hearing without me present. Fire Chief DeMars is also on vacation that week. He had a scheduled vacation, but he said he would come in if you wish to go forward with that. Could possibly, even if you wanted to keep it on the 11th, possibly have it earlier in the day. That's about a six and a half hour drive from here to Lansing. If the budget session were earlier in the day, they could still get down there in the evening.
That's good.
When is the date down there?
The 12th.
No, but we don't want you driving all night either.
Oh, and Ron doesn't
Done it
need to
before.
either. I didn't know he was off. Can we just put it off till the next week?
Is he on vacation the whole week?
How about earlier in the day?
But he would come in. Yeah, Ron said he would come in for the budget session. He's going to be at camp. They're putting a roof on camp, so he's going to be local. He said he would come in for the budget session from his from vacation.
So you want to do a noon or something?
About noon.
That'd be great for me.
2 and
Noon
then,
would work for me, that, yeah.
Yeah.
How about for anyone else? No one?
For me.
okay.
What's
all right?
okay?
Noon?
Noon?
Noon to 2?
I may be a little
Not-
late.
On the 11th? That works.
It's fire and general fund. Okay, so you'll post that then, Randy?
Mm-hmm.
12 to 2 p.m.
So I'll make a motion, we revise the budget work session date on October 11th to noon to 2 p.m. And the subject will be fire department and general fund.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That's better.
Did we have another issue on a date that we had changed at the last meeting?
No,
No, she had about that meeting.
18th, but
The November 7th that we changed the board meeting.
that is the 7th is the election. We moved the board meeting to the 8th, which is the planning commission meeting. We asked the planning commission if they would move their meeting to another date.
No, I haven't heard.
And they only have one meeting that month, so maybe they could do that, I believe.
Yeah, they don't meet until next Wednesday, a week from this, tomorrow.
So just let us, I guess as the board rep, let us know what they decide and we can move from there.
Okay, we're good? All right. I'm pulling my supervisor's report. Next is number 9. So that was part of the packet. I just want to point out a few things. The Marquette County Solid Waste meeting, we touched on them just a little bit, and I'm going to get some more information for Roger. I did talk to Darlene Walsh to see if she knew anything about the perpetual care fund. You saw that attachment right after mine. So let me get back to you on that when I get the information to Randy and Roger. And I might get some information for you on that. Senator Peters' office can't do much with that. We talked about the road commission, staff training. 2 other things that are new, and let's stick with the road thought for a minute. Randy and I have been talking about drainage districts, and that was one of the things that we tried to cover a little bit with the road commission representatives. And so I asked Randy today, I said, so if we have 2 drain districts right now in Trowbridge. And if we were gonna try to add a third one to help us with funding and whatever other qualifications that we would need with the state to help us with our drainage, I said, you know, what's involved? And then we kind of threw Dave's name in the pot because he's been so involved, and Pete too, but and so involved with the road project. So I said, well, what if we, you know, we can't really deal with the drain commissioner, we have to go through the road commission? We're really between a rock and a hard place with this whole road issue. So I guess what I'm asking the board is, would it be something that you would like to have the planning commission and or road committee look into what would be involved in adding another drain district to help us figure out how the road situation is going to be? I told Randy, I said, maybe we need to wait until next year to even look at this, because we've got to go through a winter of plowing and snow melting and everything. And he said, well, we've had enough rain this year. We can probably tell where the problems are going to be with the drainage and how to fix them, or who can fix them, or what it'll cost, or what's involved. So we kind of just said, well, maybe we should pass this off to the planning commission, have them look at the future roads map and the plan, and they're going to be working on that anyway. The road committee could either do some of the legwork or give them some information or help them work on it. Doesn't have to be, this isn't anything that has to be done right, you know, this week. But I kind of wanted your thoughts, just to throw this out, because we know we're going to have continuous drainage issues, especially since the roads are different. And we have them anyway. So, Ernie, I think you had your hand up first.
I think, you say we have 2 drain districts in the township now. I think doing a little historical background on why do we have 2 drain districts in that, where are they located in that? What's involved with those? I think once you get the historical matter on that, then you can start looking at possibly the third one. So you have some historical data as to why they were even developed, and that, because it's a lot easier then to move forward. People ask why you're doing it. You have some background at the same time in that, because I don't have the background as to why they were formulated or anything else in that. So that may be something to start with in that too, so.
Might be a funding thing for me.
Badger District's the only one I know, but I know there's a second one. Who's next? Dave?
I would think the way to go about this is just have the board direct the planning commission to explore it. And the planning commission do as it sees fit. If it wants to send it to the road committee for some input, whatever they want. But I think now is the time to start doing something with it, because there's a lot of background stuff you have to research on this. There's a lot of what ifs you have to explore with this. And I think you're an easy 3, 4, 5 months before you come back with any kind of a recommendation as to how to proceed.
Yeah, I figured this would be a project, that's why I recommended them. John?
Before we ask any committee to do something as big as this, I think that we need to get the information that Ernie has requested. I don't think we should just arbitrarily pass this on. It's going to require intense research, and it's going to require probably staff involvement. Before we do that, before we ask any committee to do anything, we ought to know a whole lot more about it.
Okay. This discussion was today, so that's why I thought, well,
That's my
before I even ask anybody anything, I'm gonna see what you guys think, because if you say no, then it's a waste of time. Pete?
I think it's a good idea to go to the planning commission, because I would think that the planning commission would ask that question. So it might be a funding thing if you start a 3rd district, Ernie. I think it might be something with the funding. But also, I hope that they would have a meeting with the road committee to sit down, because I think we know where the water problems are. I heard tonight what Dave is telling me, and I do the same thing. When it's raining out, I just tell my wife, see in a half hour. When it's raining real bad, we're out there riding around. We know where the water problems are. So I don't know if the planning commission besides Dave would be able to tell them exactly. You can see after the fact, but it'd be a good meeting within, but I think the planning commission would look at the districts and stuff like, well, they should do it anyways, let's put it that way, so. I think it'd be a good thing to move it to the planning commission and they can move on with they want to do with it.
Okay, let me get you some history first then, and we'll see where you want to go. The other thing falls to the planning commission as well. Commissioner Chiotti, Frank, called me today and resigned. He's having Frank Chiotti, the planning commissioner, he's having some health issues and said he didn't want to let it go on too much longer. So I'm putting out a request for anybody who might be interested in filling that spot. It's my recommendation to the board, so they can get a hold of me. My phone numbers and emails are on our website, or anybody here in the office can find me. I do have, Dave said that I'm sorry, I saw his hand up. Dan said he had talked to someone months ago that was interested. So because that first contact has been made, he's gonna look up and see if he can find out who that was. And I'll get back to them and see if they're still interested, but then, if they change their mind, or depending on qualifications. The commission it's a very important body. And if you look through the bylaws even, it says that there shall be, I think it is shall, representatives of the entire community. It's just not a committee that you put together with people that have this particular interest. It should have, some financial information or people involved, and some recreation people involved, and maybe contractors or builders or real estate or business people, or, it should have that mix of the community, school teachers, whatever. I mean, you need to have a variety. It's mandated, and I agree with that too, that's important. So when I say we're looking for someone in particular, that's the reason. Just because someone applies, I think we need to be cautious of who we accept, because they need to have some, we wouldn't want to have 5 bankers sitting up there, or 5 trail people, or 5 of anything. We need to have that diversity. It's very important because they're covering so many facets.
I just remembered, by the way, that the dementia kicked out for a minute, and so I'll get a hold of them and.
Okay, good. John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think when we're looking for people to serve on committees, it's all well and good to have input from as many people who want to make input. But I think we should also include one of the more valuable person on the committee, our chairman of these committees, are knowledgeable about what the needs are, and I think that we should include them when we're asking who might be good to serve in this position. Frequently the chair is much more aware of the need of the committee than perhaps many of us.
Any one of those could be the chair, the next chair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I told Randy we could obviously call Pelto and talk to Jason McCarthy and get their input, because they are in the community more and they know.
Well,
but I am going to honor that first request and just find out who it is.
Sure.
Of the person who asked
Just to
months
be on the
ago.
committee.
Yeah, because I would hate to appoint somebody and have them come and say, "Oh, hey, last year I asked about this. Why was I not considered?" So I want to honor that request first. But yes, I will check with both of them. Which one?
I would hope the first thing we'd do along these lines is go back in the records and see who has expressed an interest in it.
I did when I was
And
filling
certainly
and making
contact
the
all of those
recommendations.
individuals and see if they want to renew their interest before because that would be very annoying to someone to
Mhm.
not be considered
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, I did check with everybody who did show an interest, and either the people are already on the commission, or they weren't interested at all. They didn't have the time. But I can go back and do that too.
But then we're just going to put another call out for it, right? And see if there's
Yep.
people out there that are interested.
Yep, if anybody's interested, let me know. Okay? All right, that's all I had that I needed to throw at you. Public comment. Any comments you want to share? Meeting wrap-up. Any announcements from anyone? Randy?
Upcoming election dates, October 10th, which is next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. You have to be here by 4 o'clock to be registered for the November election. If you're after that date, you can vote, but just not in that November election. Clerk's hours is going to be on November 4th at 12 p.m. It's a Saturday. I'll be here from noon to 2 to give out or take any absentee ballots. And the election is November 7th, Tuesday, and polls will be open at 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And October 17th, which is in 2 weeks, at 4:30 p.m.,
You heard anything?
we are going to have the election public accuracy test here in the township. It's going to be a very short test because it's not a very long ballot. So, and that evening we'll have the election commission meeting at 6:15 in this boardroom to appoint election inspectors. They are going to have election training. I don't know if it's passed already, but if you want to be election inspector, either contact myself or Lois, and we'll get you hooked up to the next training session. And if we can't use you in this coming election, we'll hopefully get to use you next year. So that's it.
Good. Dave?
Some confusion exists on my part as to when I'm supposed to give the update for the planning commission and the road committee.
Yeah, we passed that over with not having any staff, but you're welcome to do that now.
Why don't you tell us about it?
The planning commission is meeting on the 11th, and that is going to be another public hearing on the text amendments that were not approved the last time.
Can I stop you? Because then that's
Sure.
going to be a problem. That's probably why I haven't heard back about changing the meeting. Because
Right.
if it's a public
That
hearing.
was November 7th was the problem, not the 11th.
No, it's October. It's the night before he would be leaving. The budget hearing was, we had asked, didn't we? Am I on the wrong meeting?
The planning commission is on the 11th, which that budget work session is at noon on that day.
Okay.
The one that was in question that moved the planning commission meeting was the one that we moved from the 7th to the 8th of November.
Okay. So we're safe.
You're all right there.
Okay. So they can keep their meeting. Good. Thank you. Pardon the interruption.
We haven't got the minutes of the last meeting of the planning commission,
Okay.
and yet we're going into a second public hearing on the subjects that would have been discussed at that last meeting.
The last meeting didn't take place. The last planning commission meeting did not happen.
No, the planning commission meeting that you had the same public, public hearing.
Right.
Okay, we don't have the minutes of that.
The best there is out there is draft of those minutes. That's why I've included it in my briefing at the last meeting and again at this meeting to let everybody know that there is a public hearing going to be scheduled for that.
Okay, my point is, there was a public hearing, and there was, the subjects failed to be advanced to the township board.
Two of them.
Well, we didn't get the third one either. The point is, the minutes of that meeting haven't reached the board yet, or haven't been available to the board. And yet there's another public hearing on the same subject. So for the board that relies on reading the planning commission minutes, we don't know why.
Let me work.
That's my point.
Yep. Let me work on that. You're right.
I mean, and we're having a second public hearing on the same subject, and the board is not aware of why. I think that's a shortcoming, and we need to correct that. I don't know, what's it cost to have another public hearing without us knowing it? I think the cost is,
I think it's the same cost as having a public hearing with us knowing.
No, I don't think he means financially. I don't want
That's
to
it.
speak for you.
and so someone called for a public hearing on the same subject, same issues, and yet the board is ignorant of what happened at the meeting on the first public hearing.
I think possibly a solution to that is to include the draft planning commission minutes as opposed to the approved planning commission minutes.
Yep, because we get draft minutes anyway of everything.
And we could update, if there's any changes, at the next time you could have it updated. That would probably solve it.
I just think it's a surprise to see that there's a second public hearing on the same subjects where there obviously was people in attendance that voiced their thoughts about the issues. And now it's coming back. It's coming back for a second shot without us even knowing what happened at that meeting, at that public hearing. And I
Okay.
think that needs to be corrected by the chair.
Okay. Go ahead with your report, thank you.
The road committee. I passed out a punch list. The sequence of events that happened here is on the 28th. UPEA went out and did a punch list that was a page and a half in length. And on the 29th, during a rain event, I took it upon myself to go out and do a punch list and note everything that appeared to be a problem. On Monday yesterday, I got together with UPEA and we compared our notes, and we went out and did another 4-mile tour of the road rehab areas, and we came up with the punch list that you have in front of you. Most of the punch list items that were on UPEA's initial punch list and the one that I put together on the 29th had already been completed. And a couple areas of note is if you look at that list and you see item number 3, this is at the at Huron and Granite by the lift station, and there is a water problem there, and you can see what their solution is. They're going back to lower the ditch so that the water does not pool there. It was pooling to the top of the culvert on the drive going into the to the lift station. The other one is down on 16. It is a 200-foot long ditch along the north edge of Center Street that is very close to the road. And there are some concerns that it's going to undermine the road and we're going to have a problem there. So they're going back to do some re-ditching and put some riprap in there so they can stabilize that bank. Those are the two big things that are on the punch list. They were already working on the corner of Summit and Ontario. There was an issue there that needed some riprap where there's a culvert that goes underneath the Summit Street. And there was, again, it was another issue where they had the close proximity of a gas pipeline that prevented them from digging the ditch the way it should be dug. And they were going back to put some riprap in there to stabilize that bank because the water comes down Ontario, and until they finish the reconstruction on Ontario, it's getting behind the bit curb that's on Summit Street, and it's causing some erosion. So the solution there was to go in and put some riprap in there. I didn't get over there today to see if they have it done. They were working on it today. I talked to UPEA this afternoon about 5 o'clock, and they said that they will have these areas that are requiring riprap will be done by the end of the day tomorrow. And they're waiting to hear from Baco on coming in and scheduling these other items, which primarily is mailboxes and some erosion where the grass seed didn't take place before we got our rains. And it's a matter of correcting those. And just so everybody knows, when they go back in and do that, and the big question is, are we getting charged for that again? In the contract, we get charged for the tonnage of stuff that they put in there. We're not necessarily getting charged for them to do the work that was not done correctly the first time. The only way we would get charged for them to come back and redo some work is if it was outside of the scope of the specs for the job, which is the corner of Summit and Ontario is outside of the scope of the job because nobody knew that gas line was there. And those type of things. The one over on Huron and Granite, where they gotta dig the ditch deeper, other than the tonnage, we're gonna have to pay for the riprap that has to go in there. I would think that's just them doing the job correctly. And then I think over on Center Street, that's anybody's guess how that's gonna be charged. I'm sure we're gonna have to pay for the material they're gonna put in there. It's just a matter of how much the charge is going to be for them to go in and redo that work. If you remember this issue on Center Street, it started right out at the beginning of the job where they were trying to put a ditch in there, and it's along a very steep embankment that's quite high on the north side of the road, and they couldn't get the ditch back where they needed to get it away from the road. And there's a lot of water comes down. That's this right down a steep slope on Center Street, and it goes down into a creek at the bottom of the slope. And if you remember that issue, it was on the same street that has the yard that buried the creek on the other side and put it in a culvert. So that's all in the same handprint. So this is where some of all those problems are coming up with. And this issue is just because we both looked at it and said, it's going to undermine the road and the road's going to cave into the ditch if we don't do something with it. So that's where it's at. I don't think they're going to get the entire punch list done by the end of the week, simply because they didn't have anybody scheduled to come up and do this. But they are working on the more critical things that requires the riprap.
So you're talking about all of this slope restoration and ditching and...
You see one on there on Fair Street. I think Treasurer Johnson brought it up before. They got rained out, and they never got back to do the whole street. The slope restoration is done, but they never got back to seed it and put the mulch on it. So they have to come back and do that.
But what's discouraging is after all of our discussion with the road commission, the ditches, the water, this is like...
This is the one thing that the road rehab project did not have sufficient funds in it, and we knew this going in to correct all the drainage problems. And what we're trying to do these are a couple of the more critical drainage problems. This one on that 200 feet along Center Street is very serious. If we don't do that, we're going to lose a good portion of that road as soon as we get a couple heavy rains. So, and these are the things that are push the scope of the road rehab project, but you certainly have to take care of it or it's going to affect the roads eventually. But this is the stuff that I was ranting about a few minutes earlier in the meeting about the county not stepping up and doing anything with that.
And you know, then the trickle down or the trickle up of that too is the reduction in funding because of the tax tribunal.
Yeah.
When we expected to have so much money when we started the analysis of this project 3 years ago, and the tribunal participants, or whatever you want to call them, that keep going, just whittled that money away. So if somebody was paying, I don't know, whatever number, say $50,000 in taxes, and they went to the tribunal, and now they're paying 15, whatever that contribution was toward the road project has now just been cut by 2/3.
Well, initially when we put this whole thing together before the tax tribunal issue was finalized, 1.5 mils was sufficient, and there was sufficient money there to address these more pressing issues. But and that's why we went back and looked at it. If you recall, before we started the project, are we going to actually go ahead with it? we had to take a closer look and see if the funds were there to do it. And we knew the funds were there to finish it up, and I think we're gonna be well within the budget, but there's not a lot of money left over to go out and address those drainage issues.
Pete?
And that's one of the reasons we're so a little bit upset about the county road commission, because we expect them to step up a little bit. You know, it's their roads, we're trying to do as much as we can, and they could have done some different things with the drainage system, but they just decided not to. They were told how to do it, what to do it. It'd be, say, 5 lots, but they just choose not to do it. That's how you get upset over that
Yep.
stuff.
They're not even willing to work with us or talk to us. John?
Yeah, I think we ought to take a moment to give thanks. Our community in general, and this board in particular, ought to be grateful for the efforts made to actually illustrate to the county how an operation ought to be looked at in detail from concept to completion. And the reports we're getting are excellent. I know the leadership has been great on the road commission, and I think that it shouldn't be ignored that we need to be grateful for that and compliment the people involved. I think it's an example of why we don't understand how the county operates, and when we can, as a smaller community, can operate and do things like this and create a great aid to the county, because we've solved a lot of the problems for them by our road commission efforts and our county, or our community's willingness to pass a millage to take care of what really is their problem. I compliment the committee for what they've done, but I think it's a classic example that should be talked about with our county people when we get a chance to say, this is why we don't understand. You won't even cooperate and have conversation with us.
And that's some of my frustration where it's coming from. Is, I mean, the residents of this township are gonna spend some $7 million to get this taken care of. And they're more than willing to step forward and do that. And the only reason that it worked is because they had some confidence in the board that they were gonna spend the money exactly on what they said they were gonna spend it on. And I would suggest, and it's strictly my opinion, that if the county went to the same residents and asked them for 2 mills to solve all the road problems in the county, it would be defeated by as wide a margin as ours was passed by, because there's no credibility there that they're gonna do what they say they're gonna do. Because everybody knows the first thing they're gonna do is something as foolish as buying new equipment.
Lynn, just my frustration with this is, a friend of mine's an engineer in downstate, and I picked him up and we went through this whole project and showed him what was there and how it should be. He explained how it should be done and stuff like that, and for the county just to, it's their roads, their drainage and everything else, and for them to step back and say, oh, no, that's not the right. Well, I think they take the same standards, either you're downstate or upstate with drainage, and if they do it down there right, why can't we do it up here? And for them not to do it, me and Dave go back and forth on this thing, because I holler at him, he hollers at me, but ours didn't, in my estimation, didn't measure up to what we could have had, so, with the right cooperation.
Ernie?
On a different subject.
Thanks, Ernie.
Okay, the taxes were paid, were due on the 14th of September and that. I still have a number of individuals and businesses who have not paid their taxes. It's costing them money in fees and interest rates and that. So at this point in time, I'm just trying to put a word out to them that it's costing you money and that. The other thing is that the deputy treasurer and myself are working on, we have a few write-offs, which means we have businesses who have left the area, and we have no way of getting hold of them. We've tried for 5 years in that, and we have to do a 5-year point in that, and then we're gonna have a write-off, and that will be coming to the board as to show you what it is. Relatively small. It's been relatively small the last few years in that, so that's where we're going in that. So that'll be coming to you within the next, probably the next meeting in that, so.
Okay. Anything else for announcements?
I got two things I'd just like,
Sure.
one, this Saturday, and I don't want to speak for the fire chief, but this Saturday is going to be the fire prevention static display that they're going to have at the park in Marquette on Washington Street. All the different departments will be getting their fire trucks together and having a parade and a lot of good things for the kids, a lot of prizes and everything. Just so everybody knows that, they can get their kids out there.
You know what time, Dan?
I don't know what time it's going to, well, it's not gonna do any good on this, but they should be able to go and just call the fire hall tomorrow and they'll know what the times are on that.
Should be in the paper
Yeah,
also.
it'll also be in the newspaper, Harlow Park.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good
And
turnout.
the second thing that I just wanted to say, that I will not be here for the budget work session on November 1st. I'll be out of town for that. That's it.
Anything else for announcements?
Well, yeah, managers' reports under that, too.
Yep. I just want to make sure we finish that. Okay, Randy, your report?
Actually, it's pretty brief. We've been tied up, getting the budget ready. Just to remind the board, we do have budget work sessions scheduled, 3 budget work sessions. We do have to have an adopted budget by December 31st. There has to be a public hearing no later than December 15th, and that public hearing has to be advertised at least 7 days prior to it occurring. So that's back to December the 8th, and it takes about 7 days to get that formatted and in the paper. So by December, right around November, the end of November, the very beginning of December, we need to have that ad in the paper. So just kind of a heads up in terms of our process and where we need to be in the budget work sessions. We've briefly touched on the Supreme Court hearing coming up on October 12th. For those in the audience or watching this on TV on YouTube that don't know what that's about is, as you know, for about 6 years now we've been battling the tax tribunal issue. It's taken about $300,000 out of our general fund annually. Impacted the fire department significantly in terms of their revenue streams. We dropped in 2012, 2013. We had grown by on average between 5% and 7% a year in taxable value. Since then, it's been about 2 to 2.5%. Because the values are significantly reduced by the tax tribunal. The members of the tax tribunal changed over about a year ago, and the new tax tribunal heard a case brought by Menards against the city of Escanaba, challenging their taxes. The city of Escanaba and the new tax tribunal prevailed in that case. They did not adopt the dark stores theory. Menards appealed that to the Court of Appeals. Court of Appeals upheld the tax tribunal, and that is now the case that's going to the Supreme Court. We are hopeful that the Supreme Court, which we've been trying for 6 years now to get this case before the Supreme Court, will look at the law in terms of how it's been applied by the tax tribunal previously, and we are hoping will support the city of Escanaba in that decision, which will then end the dark store issue going forward. It will not solve anything that's already happened, but the big box stores would go back on the tax roll at their appropriate tax rate starting the next year.
Will
So
that be televised?
no. No, and we probably won't have a decision. They'll hear the case on the 12th. They might have a decision by the end of the year. It'll likely be into the first part of next year before they actually issue a decision. No, it's hard to say when they'll issue their decision. But that is a critical case for us. As I mentioned, former Supervisor Leamet and I will both be there, along with our attorneys that filed our briefs on our behalf, as well as 13 other communities that were in a joint brief with us to be there in case there's any testimony that needs to be made. So that's it. That's all that I had.
Any questions for the manager?
I have a couple.
Sure, go ahead, Pete.
Just happen to have one, John. I can find it now. I was talking after riding around the other night. They're talking to people up on top of Huron Street, and there's 5 6 people a little concerned about the noise from the generators from Marquette Light and Power. So I made a list. I give Randy a copy of this here, and you could hear it. He said he don't even keep his window open anymore. And that was, I think, only one generator going. What happens when you get the 3 of them going? And also I brought up about the importance of the drainage, because up here on the corner of Huron and Erickson, it's a flat road. And there's not much you get going for water runoff. You put a little bib curve up there and the water's gonna settle. It's settled right on the corner of Erickson and Huron, and it just pools up there. And like Dave said earlier, and we were talking about drainage and that's the importance of it, because we do have some without hills around here. So that's some of the problem that I think we could solve with the drainage system, and that'll help it out, so. But this light and power thing, I think is gonna become a problem. So, also, Mr. Manager, on Cherry Street between Woodridge and Granite, the trees hanging over the road and the wires, it's one of the worst places in the township right now.
I saw
So
that.
if they're asking you if we have any bad spots that they're cutting back, that would be one between on Cherry Street between Woodridge and Granite. It's real bad, so.
East End.
Okay. Go ahead, Ernie.
Talking about the trees hanging over the wires, they're out there cleaning right-of-ways right now, and the company they got, there isn't much left when they get through either. They pretty well take everything in that, too.
Yeah, BLP's trimming right now. It's not the road commission. The road commission does where there's clear vision issues, the road commission will clear some branches. But we're getting to the point now where leaves are supposed to be starting to fall. Some are, but we're a little bit behind seeing on that. The BLP basically then is when they react to trimming those branches once the leaves are off. But they are out doing it, and we'll take a look at this one and also get that on the list.
John?
I'm interested in Pete's comments about the noise. I'll just remind the board that when the power company was here and asked us, tried to tell us about what they were going to do, we very definitely put a request in that would there be any noise or air pollution, because the units that they were putting in were very close to our community. I think we have a letter on file saying, 2 letters on file that indicate that that will not be the case. So you can encourage, Pete, you can encourage people to listen closely, and if this becomes a problem, we'll take the action with those letters saying it would not be the case. We'll put Roger to work.
I already had one little blow up there, so.
Not only do we do have letters, we have a video presentation that is still on YouTube from that time.
Of them admitting.
Them saying that it wouldn't be
No
a problem.
What was the date on that? Do you remember?
I don't know, it was about a few years,
Yeah, it's about two
it's
and
a
a half
few
years
years
ago.
back, but
And we specifically identified the higher elevations on Huron as our concern, Huron and Erickson, up in that area.
And the questions that we were asking was, were the towers to get rid of the noise and get rid of the air pollution that can come from oil or whatever driven, gasoline driven generators are? Would that be a problem for our community that is so close to, it's like 500 yards or less to our residential area? And that's why the questions were asked. And that Dave's always wanting people to be thorough in their questions, and I think we had that on file.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe we had to just bring out those letters and give people a copy of them.
Mm-hmm.
Or what's gonna happen when the foliage is off the trees and
And the other
Fire
two
up the other
generators
two.
fire?
Well, you get 3 units like that. They're generators, whatever you want to call them, they're generators.
Mhm.
And generators
Make noise.
make noise. Generators pollute.
Mhm. The other thing I thought was fairly interesting, I don't know if the board members caught this it was only in the paper for a very brief while, the indication from the VLP that now magically all of a sudden they don't have a problem getting energy from the grid, and they're talking about reducing the use of the South Power Plant now.
Unit number 3 in Cyrus is no longer needed. That means that the Cyrus plant is no longer needed. It'll follow Presque Isle in no longer being needed. That's another unfortunate loss of revenue for the city.
Well, and the question becomes,
Unexpected, because they approved the
Oh, yeah.
units put in.
well, and then the question is, was it a wise investment to purchase the 3 peaking units? So here we are, less than 2 years downstream, and now we have an excess of power, potentially.
All approved by the commission.
Diligence leaves something to be desired. Pete?
Just got a couple more things to get off my plate here.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
I just want the manager or someone to, maybe the supervisor, take a look at our ordinance. And this one, publications, does your township need a solar ordinance? I don't know if we ever looked at that. And also the township.
Sunshine first.
Yeah, strict gun ordinance, we could be sued. And the third one is electric bikes.
E-bikes.
They call them e-bikes.
Electric bikes.
And that's gonna become an issue, because they're saying they don't want them on the trail, the bike trail, because they're not a non-motorized.
They've been,
So, They're banned in some areas.
no, the parks, the U.S. Parks Commission has banned e-bikes.
Right? So I just want to turn it over to the planning commission or whatever, just to take a look at it, of these 3 different items, and, because we said we should be looking at our ordinances and that, so.
Yeah.
But the e-bike is a kind of, I showed Mike earlier about that, so. It's kind of issue we sort of kidded around for the last 3, 4, 5 months about it. Now it's there, so,
Shouldn't be kidding around about it because it's in the legislature right now.
yeah.
There's been legislation introduced to not only allow but require e-bikes access to all paved and crushed surface
I know.
trails.
But I just want to, if we can get ahead of the big discussion, so.
Okay. Is that it for
The firearms
manager?
the firearms one is interesting as well. Who knows what after the most recent event? Who knows where that's going to go? But there is a law that basically creates liability for us if we overly restrict firearms. So more stringent than state law. Open carry and concealed carry.
Okay. Review of our motions, Randy.
Okay, we had 4 motions this evening. The first motion was approve the consent agenda as amended. Second motion was approval of the agenda as presented. Third motion was to send a letter, direct the supervisor to send a letter to the county board to address our road commission communication problems. I'll rewrite that, but that's a synopsis of what that motion was. The fourth motion was to move the budget session from, on October 11th, from 5 to 2 p.m., from noon to 2 p.m. on October 11th. And that's all the motions that we had this evening.
Okay. And no other assignments per se came through the motion.
No action items, I should say, for that.
Anything for a future agenda? Anything anybody wants to look at or talk about, or?
Do have 2 items on future agenda from the last meeting.
Strategic planning and future water project discussions. That's what we had last meeting. My feeling is those 2 items would almost be work session material, not board meeting material, because it would take a long time depending on the discussion going, so.
I just figured it'd at least be part of the budget or discussion. I've contacted Susan Radwan about our calendar for next year. I haven't heard back from her, but she's preparing for our staff training this week on policy governance. They'll be doing the video presentation for a couple hours, or 3 or 4 hours.
Thursday and Friday. Yep, 9 to noon.
So they'll be a little bit tied up.
What's the difference in the procedure there
For
for
the
staff?
Well, it's just our reporting process.
Yeah, knowing how to report and what the reports look like and what Randy's gonna need. That'll end up coming back to us.
It'll be those monitoring reports that we'll be getting, Pete. They're gonna get taught how to write those and get a kind of a standard form
Good.
for that.
Okay, everybody comes up with something, let's save those for at least after the budget.
And like I said, I think those items were more work session material than board meeting material, because they're gonna take a few hours to discuss.
Yeah. And once we get through the budget and see if anything happens with the Escanaba Tribunal issue, we may know something after the first of the year. Any board member comment?
Just want to make one comment. I think we had a good discussion on the different items tonight, and then we always have to be careful running over each other and talking, but I think it went pretty good, and I think the discussions were worthwhile, so.
And if you think about it, with so few agenda items, by following policy governance, we are deliberating and we're discussing the future of the township and the makeup and our philosophy, and that's what we're supposed to do.
That's the important thing here.
It is.
You know,
So that
it's
we
the
know
residents that we
where we're
represent.
going. Yep.
you know.
Okay. I need a motion for one last
So moved, we adjourn.
Support.
motion and support at 8:05 PM. We are adjourned. Thank you.